Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Dr. Mary Grace from the Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about a module, Disability, Aging and Inclusive Design under the paper entitled Physiology and Sports Anthropology. In this module, the learner will come to know about the following topics in detail: to know about the concept of aging and disability, to have an understanding about the different types of aging. Also, we'll come to know about the consequences of aging and also to develop an understanding about inclusive designing and gadgets to aid disability aging. Disability is an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. Impairment is a problem in body function or structure. An activity limitation is a difficulty encountered by an individual in executing a task or action, while a participation restriction is a problem experienced by an individual in involvement in life situations. Disability is thus not just a health problem, but it is a complex phenomenon reflecting the interaction between features of a person's body and features of the society in which he or she lives. Overcoming the difficulties faced by people with disabilities requires interventions to remove environmental and social barriers. Over a billion people are estimated to live with some form of disability. This corresponds to about 50% of the world's population. Between 110 million, which is 2.2%, and 190 million, which is 3.8% people 50 years and older have significant difficulties in functioning. Furthermore, the rates of disability are increasing in part due to aging populations and an increase in chronic health conditions. The aging process of some groups of people with disabilities begins earlier than usual. For example, some people with developmental disabilities show signs of premature aging in their 40s and 50s. Types of aging. Individual aging. Individual aging is viewed from a social perspective with a particular focus on people with a disability. It refers to the structural, sensory, motor, behavioral, and cognitive changes in a person over time, in particular relating to how these factors influence opportunities and lifestyle at various stages of the life of the person. Although aging is inevitable, universal, and irreversible, it is a multi-dimensional, dynamic process. It involves an interaction of biological, psychological, social, and cultural factors, which may result in different rates and types of aging for a particular individual or cohort. Individual aging has been conceptualized using three broad dimensions to examine the biological, psychological, and social changes that result from increasing chronological age. There has been a widening from an earlier focus on the medical and biological aspects of aging to a broader view encompassing three dimensions. Chronological aging. Chronological aging is only an approximate measure of the development or changes within an individual. There are substantial variations in the rate of physical, emotional, social, and psychological development between individuals. Biological aging. It takes into account individual differences. Biological aging mainly reflects the relationship between biological maturation or deterioration and changes in an individual's ability to adapt and perform specific physical, cognitive, and social tasks. Psychological aging. Psychological aging involves the reaction of the individual to biological, cognitive, sensory, motor, emotional, and behavioral changes, and to external environmental factors affecting these changes. Aging is not a biological and psychological process, but also a social process. Social aging. Social aging refers to patterns of interaction between the aging individual and the social system within which they live. Population aging, which is viewed from a demographic perspective. It is a result of the interaction of three basic demographic components, mainly fertility, mortality, and migration. Population aging is indicated by an increase in the proportion of older people. This is mainly attributable to lower fertility and an increase in the absolute number of older people, with the latter largely a result of lower mortality among older people and a large birth cohort aging. While substantial immigration may reduce the extent of population aging, it cannot keep the population young. Significant fluctuations in cohort size resulting from substantial changes in the basic demographic components will affect the aging process. The time of onset, the speed and scale of the population aging process have great social and economic impact on both individuals and society. Population aging is thus a powerful and transforming demographic force. The world is on the brink of a demographic milestone. Since the beginning of recorded history, young children have outnumbered the number of people aged 65 or older and will outnumber children under the age of 5. Driven by falling fertility rates and remarkable increases in life expectancy, population aging will continue and even accelerate. Disability aging. The aging population is far from a homogeneous group. There are important differences between particular groups and subgroups which need to be identified and acknowledged. One particular group which has been more or less completely overlooked are disabled people who are aging. To be clear, this does not refer to people who may experience disability as a consequence of the aging process, but to those who become disabled in child or adulthood and who are now beginning to age as disabled people. The number of people who are aging with a disability is also increasing at different rates amongst men and women and amongst different ethnic groups. Although the prevalence of some physical impairments is higher amongst males, many of the largest subgroups of older disabled people contain more women than men. The most recent national survey estimates that there are a total of 3.6 million disabled women in Britain alone, compared to 2.5 million men. Amongst those aged 75 or more, disabled women outnumber men by a ratio of nearly 2.5 to 1. Reducing severe disability from disease and health conditions is one key to holding down health and social cost. The health and economic burden of disability also can be reinforced or alleviated by environmental characteristics that can determine whether an older person can remain independent despite physical limitations. The longer people can remain mobile and care for themselves, the lower are the costs for long-term care to families and society. In the meantime, generations of children and young adults who grew up in poverty and ill health in developing countries will be entering old age in coming decades, potentially increasing the health burden of older populations in those countries. Consequences of aging. Aging has profound consequences on a broad range of economic, political, and social processes. First and foremost is the increasing priority to promoting the well-being of the growing number and proportion of older persons in most countries of the world. Indeed, the Madrid International Plan of Action, which is the MIPA, adopted at the Second World Assembly on Aging, emphasized that older persons should be able to participate in and benefit equitably from the fruits of development to advance their health and well-being, and that society should provide enabling environments for them to do so. While much attention has been given to the fiscal and macroeconomic challenges represented by population aging, which governments must certainly confront and prepare for, MIPA also recognizes the crucial importance of intergenerational interdependence, which needs to be redefined as the population distribution shifts to more older persons and relatively fewer children. Aging also entails a change in the sex composition of the population since women tend to outlive men. They therefore constitute a substantial majority of the older population. As fertility has fallen, women's labor force participation has been globally on the rise. Although women are still engaged less than men in paid work, at the same time, women play a key role as providers of family support and care for all generational groups, especially children and older persons. Aging is also partly the result of the trend toward longer and generally healthier lives of individuals. But because of chronic and degenerative diseases, which are more common at older ages, they result in an increased prevalence of non-communicable diseases at the population level. Also, as societies age, they also bring about changes in the living arrangements of older people vis-a-vis younger family members and in the private and public systems of economic support for children, adults, and mostly critically older persons. The world is also facing a situation where there are more older people than children and more people at extreme old age than ever before. As both the proportion of older people and the length of life increase throughout the world, key questions arise. Will population aging be accompanied by a longer period of good health, a sustained sense of well-being, and extended periods of social engagement and productivity, or will it be associated with more illness, disability, and dependency? Managing population aging also requires building needed infrastructure and institutions as soon as possible. The longer we delay, the more costly and less effective the solutions are likely to be. With continuing declines in death rates among older people, the proportion aged 80 or older is rising quickly, and more people are living past 100 years. The limits to life expectancy and lifespan are not as obvious as once thought, and there is mounting evidence from cross-national data that with appropriate policies and programs, people can remain healthy and independent even in old age and continue to contribute to their communities and families. The potential for an active, healthy old age is tempered by one of the most daunting and potentially costly consequences of ever longer life expectancies. The increase in people with dementia patients eventually need constant care and help with the most basic activities of daily living, creating a heavy economic and social burden. Prevalence of dementia rises sharply with age. Many studies have found that an estimated 25 to 30% of people aged 85 or more have dementia. Aging is taking place alongside with other broad social trends that will affect the lives of older people. Economics globalizing. People are more likely to live in cities, and technology is evolving rapidly. Demographic and family changes mean that there will be fewer older people with families to care for them. People today have fewer children and are less likely to be married and are also less likely to live with older generations. With declining support from families, society will need better information and tools to ensure the well-being of the aged. Unless new and more effective interventions are in place, disease prevalence is expected to rise dramatically with the aging of the population in the world. Inclusive design. Inclusive design is defined by the UK government as a process whereby designers, manufacturers, and service providers ensure that their products and services address the needs of the widest possible audience. It is used in a similar way to the term universal design in the United States and design for all in Europe. The aim of inclusive design is to improve the quality of life for all by making products, environments, and services more accessible and usable for the widest possible population. Inclusive design should benefit people of all ages and abilities. It follows the principle of user-centered design, which is also known as UCD, and it caters for a wider population rather than ad hoc groups of users. Inclusive design actually requires empathy and understanding of all potential users. It presents a challenge to designers who actually begin the design process with some presumptions about the potential users based on their own experience and expectations. In the United States, inclusive design is often used interchangeably with universal design to label a design approach that implies equity and social justice by design. Universal design, a term introduced by late Ron Mayes, founder of the Center for Universal Design at the NC State University, denotes the design of products and environments to be usable to the greatest extent possible by all people throughout their lifespan without adaptation or specialized design. As such, universal or inclusive design can be considered as contributing to sustainability. Therefore, sustainability seems to be an important component of universal or inclusive design processes. When considering architects' disappointing uptake of sustainable and inclusive design, a common reason seems to be the lack of knowledge that has the applicability required by architectural practice. Current discourse increasingly emphasizes the need for academic knowledge production to be relevant and for academics to learn how to translate and transmit their knowledge to other users. The move to consider a wider range of users was articulated as a universal design or design for all agenda. The principal motivation of the universal design agenda was to increase the range of people who could use mainstream products. The essential data was that mainstream products should either directly cater for everyone without the need for modification or adaptation, or that accessibility hooks should be built into all mainstream products to support specialized access equipment. Some significant differences must be introduced into the user-centered design paradigm if users with disabilities are to be included. In order to ensure that these differences are fully recognized by the field, it would be appropriate if the new methodologies which must be developed were entitled User-Sensitive Inclusive Design. The use of the term inclusive rather than universal reflects the view that inclusivity is a more achievable and in many situations appropriate goal than universal design or design for all. Sensitive replaces centered to underline the extra levels of difficulty involved when the range of functionality and characteristics of the user groups can be so great that it is impossible in any meaningful way to produce a small representative sample of the user group, nor often to design a product which truly is accessible by all potential users. Accessibility features are now being offered as part of some mainstream designs and products, but the concept of universal design is still only in its infancy. Researchers need to consider carefully how to take best advantage of demographic trends, the best approaches both for designers of specialized equipment and for mainstream designers. The requirements of these two groups of designers may be very different, and it is important to take a pragmatic view. A range of design situations must be considered. Universal design for equipment designed for as wide a range of functionality as possible. The design of optional accessibility features that can be called into place as required within general purpose systems. The inclusion of hooks or special input-output devices into which specialized accessibility software and hardware can be connected within software and systems. Input and output modality translation systems such as speech-to-text systems when such hooks are not available. The use of plug-in accessibility systems. Standalone assistive technology to provide particular support for a disability rather than to provide access to standard systems. Gadgets to aid disability aging. According to Newell, the special needs of older people should include more emphasis on safety and security in the home, assessment, monitoring and support, and maintenance of function, support for memory loss and dementia, reduction of social isolation, provision of entertainment and leisure, and support to remain economically active. Many older people find themselves bewildered by recent developments such as mobile phones, DVD players, set-top cable TV boxes, and the internet. There is an urgent need to address this situation. The target by targeting the design and development of technologies and systems to help increase the quality of life and enhance the functional independence of older people. These can lead to improvements in quality of life for both the elderly and their relatives, and a reduction in the societal cost. But the technology must be designed in ways that address the psychological needs and capabilities of older people who do not form a homogeneous group. Designing for older adults requires developers to take into consideration their capabilities and limitations, including psychosocial needs and their acceptance of technological support. One area of recent interest is the design of prospective memory aids for the older user. Prospective memory, which is sometimes known as PM, can be defined as the ability to remember, to remember. This involves remembering to do things at the right time, and PM tasks are pervasive to daily living. PM tasks could be essential actions such as taking medication to everyday tasks such as remembering to buy milk. Prospective memory problems are common with aging, and elderly individuals have to develop strategies to cope with this type of impairment, usually in the form of external aids. An external memory is defined as any device that facilitates memory in some way. There are various obstacles to self-determination and adequate support which are thrown into even sharper relief for the majority of older disabled people who have lived most of their lives without ever using any services or often even considering that they might do so. As McFarlane points out, the combination of this experience and the wide-ranging obstacles for people wanting to access appropriate supporting resources means that many older disabled people will simply be left with no support at all. Provision of appropriate services at a time and frequency acceptable to older disabled people who have lived for a longer period and the lifestyle of a non-disabled person are often hard to access or inadequate. What is on offer in the way of housing and personal support is often refused or rejected as not being suitable to them. Improved medical care and an increasingly aging population are leading to significant increases in the numbers of disabled people. In addition, people with congenital or long-term disabilities are living longer and showing the effects of old age. This increase in the number of people with reduced functionality has important repercussions on assistive or inclusive technology research, but the design methodology conclusions that stem from this increase in the number of people with reduced functionality are not as straightforward as they might initially appear. The overall functionality of an older person is significantly different from that of the typical disabled user of much assistive technology. Instead of having a single disability, for example, sight, hearing, speech, mobility, etc., older people usually have a more general impairment of several functions, including minor impairments in sight, hearing, dexterity, and memory. In addition to these minor disabilities, older people are significantly more likely to have a major disability rather than are younger people, since the probability of major disability increases with age. So students, let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. There is little evidence that older people are particularly technophobic, but the range of functionalities, even of a fit and active older person, is such that current systems, which is particularly software, may be either difficult or impossible for them to use. In addition, the needs and wants of people who are in the autumn of their lives are not necessarily the same as those of younger people for whom software has traditionally been designed. Therefore, while there is a clear social and demographic imperative to design systems that are appropriate for use by older people and for those with disabilities, the design methodology must be carefully considered. The design of technology systems that include older and disabled people among their target users need to take into account the demographic trends, changes in expectations and attitudes in society, changes in legislation that have given people with disabilities the rights of access to both environments and information. Another factor that should be taken into account by software designers is that in the developed world in particular, a significant proportion of older people have control of substantial wealth or disposable income. This changing distribution of economic influence is creating expanding markets for products that can be used by people with wider range of functionality and a broader spectrum of needs and wants. Until these demographic trends became obvious, there was little mainstream interest in designing for people with disabilities. The demography of the traditional disabled is changing. Increased lifespan and better medical care mean that many more people who have been disabled for all or a majority of their lives are showing the symptoms of aging. There are higher levels of sensory and cognitive dysfunction and different user motivations within this user group. In addition, the functionality and characteristic of this group of users can change more rapidly with time and the aging process than is the case for younger disabled people. Thus, there is a need for a new paradigm which takes into account the increased diversity of the user population and the changes which occur in their characteristics. This concept is being investigated within the Utopia, which is developed from the user technology for all the people, inclusive and appropriate design project. The principal findings included the need for direct and continuous contact with older and disabled people in a variety of roles, such as experimental subjects, members of the research and the development team within the project advisory groups, and as test pilots for prototype systems. Information is also a key prerequisite to disabled people having genuine choice and control over how their needs are to be met. Without information about available resources, how to access services, or, or about their rights, it is impossible for people to make genuine choices or to determine what kind of support is most appropriate to meet their self-defined needs. Newell further observed that disabled people are not a homogeneous group, and those who are normally considered as having a disability are only a small part of the population with reduced functionality. The vast majority of people have some kind of functionality that is significantly less than the norm, and most people go through phases in which they are temporarily disabled by accident, alcohol, drugs, stress, or even fatigue. Newell commented that able-bodied people can also be handicapped by the environment, which is an extreme example for being the soldier on a battlefield. Thank you so much.